Welcome back, students. So, this week we will explore further deep into machine learning, and in fact, it will be more fascinating as you will see. I plan to walk you over the project that I proposed earlier this semester regarding handwritten digit recognition using machine learning technology. Um, Now, obviously, due to the current COVID situation, we had to eliminate or omit the parts of the project where it involved collaboration from team members. Uh, but then there were some students and they were really curious, so uh, they did not want to miss out on some of the interesting materials here. So I thought of doing something interesting. I'm trying to be a little bit creative here. Rather than you guys doing this project, what I thought is, why not I come up with a separate a lecture, if you will, a lecture that covers some aspects on this project. Now, clearly, in one lecture or in one day, I cannot really uh, cover all the major grounds of this project, all the nitty-gritties of this project. However, I will try my best, and most probably you will get brief overview, or at least 40,000 feet above the ground kind of view of what machine learning might look like for the application of this structure. So that's handwritten digit recognition. So let's see how it goes. The other thing that I wanted to announce before I proceed is regarding your final exam. So I just reviewed your academic calendar, and it seems like we have 2 weeks left in this month, and then clearly there is month of May coming up. So the way I would like to proceed is, this week and next week I will conduct these online YouTube lectures. Probably by next week I will have my final lecture where I will try to uh, cover any missed out parts of the syllabus. But that's pretty much it. By this week my plan is to finish up machine learning related materials, and next week mainly focus on some of the interesting things that we can do with MATLAB, and in some cases rehash on some of the important things that we already learned. That way it gives you nice overview of what we did in MATLAB so far. So that's how I see this week and next week. And then the following week, that is the first week of month of May, I am expecting you guys will have your final exam. Again, final exam will be online. So I will be posting the exam on the exam day, and then I will give you enough time to finish your answers, and then the same way you guys are doing assignments, you will email me your solutions for the final exam. I will make separate announcement later this week regarding details of this final exam, but this is just heads up. That way you guys are aware that final exam is also coming up. So I hope you are able to enjoy these remote sessions and getting useful info and related stuff out of MATLAB. So let's get started for today. So again, today's agenda is machine learning project handwritten digit recognition. So let's see. So we reviewed this slide last time, and I kind of gave you ideology of machine learning. So I'm just trying to rehash here a little bit. So what we said back then is machine learning, how machine learning is different than conventional programming, right? So conventional programming, what you know is rules, and then you come up with answers. So really you build your program towards the already known rules, and then that program, while executing those rules, gives you useful answers to your problems. So that's how conventional programs are built, and there are several examples available, be it any internet based application, or any desktop based application, where the rules are predefined. And so what you do is you throw some data, and then machine processes that, and it already knows the rules, so it processes that input data and gives you solutions using those rules. uh, Machine learning, on the other hand, is completely uh, reversal of that ideology, in a sense that now we are not interested in answers anymore, but why not to devise something which can give us rules of the problem. So there are problems available in the real world, and then we may not know the underlying governing rules that really decide these problems. And so what we really do is we throw a lot of answers, already existing answers of those problems, to the machine, and then machine studies the relationship of those answers in reference to several of the parameters of the problem, and then come up with correlations that can establish the complex relationship between inputs and outputs, also called as rules. So in simple terms, machine learning is different than conventional programming in that it spits out rules of the problem while processing the answers. So that's the difference. So so if we know that, then we kind of discuss these simple applications. So basically what happens is, so these are categorical response variables. So person buys or does not buy, person clicks advertisement in an online platform or not, or students gets admitted or not get admitted to the master's program. um, so that is kind of tried to infer out of the machine learning methodology. And so the idea is, machine gets lots of these answers. So based on the history of people, let's say I'm talking about this first example here, where person buys or does not buy an item in grocery store. So there might be huge history of people buying certain items. So machine processes those information, and then it kind of builds a model, and then it might say that, okay, for some reason, let's say putting fruits next to vegetables makes sense, because a person may not have decided to buy fruits, but they were buying vegetables, and while they see that, they also see fruits, and so the probability that the person will buy fruits increases from that standpoint. So that's the kind of approach that is followed here, and there are many applications like that, and these are just simple examples to get the idea across the board. But that's pretty much it. Moving on. So all right, and so this graph represents such data, and really this represents a data of exam scores required to get admitted into some graduate program, let's say. And so let's say there are two exams that are required, exam 1 and exam 2, and scoring scales are lower end is 30, higher end is 100 on both the exams. And clearly you can see that this upper portion of the people or the students shown in these black marks are admitted students, and the yellow marks represent the non-admitted students. So people who did good on both the tests represent this part of the graph, where both x and y axis values are higher. So there is no surprise that these students got admitted. Now there are some students who got who did extremely well on exam 1 but not so well on exam 2. And so here they were not able to make it, but here some of them were able to make it. And similarly, on this side of the curve, there were students who did extremely well on exam 2 but not so well, or in fact very bad on exam 1. And so they were not admitted, but maybe this student got admitted. And so the problem is now, is there any relationship of this course versus student getting admitted or not? That's the kind of question we want to address here. And so machine learning model can take data like this and come up with a boundary that kind of goes this way and segregates these two data sets, where left hand side of the boundary represents students who did not get admitted to the class, while the other spectrum is indicative of admitted students. And so that boundary looks like this. I believe I had that slide here, probably not, or maybe it's coming up. Yeah, it's coming up. So I will first cover some of these grounds here. So the whole idea is really to come up with a boundary that can really distinguish between the students like that. So again, some rehash on logistic regression. So what you see here on this slide is a normal nomenclature, or maybe the best graphical representation of machine learning model, also called as neural network. Now we discussed this little bit last time, what a neural network is, and briefly speaking, the neural network ideology is motivated from the way our brain operates. So there are several neurons in our brain, and then several sensory organs provide external signals via these neurons to the cells, and then these cells process those data, and then depending on the severity of each signal, and that is again determined in the cell, and we will discuss that aspect as well. The final output is produced in the cell via output wires, and we also saw those pictures last time. And that's the way overall brain operates. It's really simplistic explanation. It's really more complicated than that, but this representation helps us establishing the framework of neural network. So to represent neural network, diagram like this is useful. So what is done is, on the left hand side, you can stack together bunch of circles, and then you will have a next layer of circle. Currently it's only one here, and that represents next layer really. So all these circles represent input data, and then the output data is just one circle here in this case, but you can generalize this for any problem. So for instance, you can have your input data as input features, in this case as stacked together circles, and then they all feed into this neural cell that can process this input data and then produce some useful output that ranges from 0 to 1, and really it represents probability of y being that value. And then we can predetermine some criteria here. So if y is 0.84, and we can say that if the outcome is more than 50%, which is greater than 0.5, then we can say that it is more possible that the output is 1. So we can convert this output into real 1 or positive. And so this can be anything. This can be literally in like our last case, these features can represent scores on the exam. So x1 might represent exam 1 score, x2 might represent exam 2 score, x0 is predetermined model parameter, and we will talk about that little bit, but let's not worry about that. It's also part of the equation, you can imagine. And so together these three constitute the input data matrix of the model, and then they all feed into this single neural cell, which is responsible to determine whether students get admitted or not. Now notice that uh, each parameter will carry its weight. So maybe it is the case that exam 1 is more important than exam 2, or maybe they are both equal, and we really don't know that. But to represent that, there is something called as weights that we need to take into account. So model really takes that into account, and I'm coming to that on the next slide, I believe. And there we go. So what you see here, this capital W represents that weight, and so this parameter really decides the importance of each of the input parameter. So like I said before, let's say x1 was exam score 1 and x3 was exam score 2. In that case, let's say weight 1, w1 represents weight or the importance for parameter x1, and w3 represents parameter for importance for parameter x3. Then um, then we can combine this information together uh, by just doing matrix multiplication of this form here. So w transpose x multiplied to uh, uh, matrix x here. So let's not worry a lot about linear algebra part of it. I'm just trying to get across this idea, so that way you will understand how machine learning ideology works. And then I'm actually I'm planning to extrapolate this further to actually show you live example of handwritten digit example. But this weight matrix multiplied by the input features will really constitute your input data or input nonlinear function. And then what happens inside this cell is really the processing of this data, right? And this processing is nothing but simply use of some nonlinear function that is useful to provide us the outcome. And there are several nonlinear functions that exist. Some of them we already discussed in the class. Some of the mathematical functions are exponential, trigonometric, inverse trigonometric, and so on and so forth. The kind of function that is pretty popular, and that's the one we will be using and we will be seeing in this example, is called as sigmoid function. And so g of something represents that nonlinear function. So g of something is really the argument here. So parenthesis represents argument. So that something can be this w transpose into x, which is a matrix. And so this matrix is fed into this sigmoid function, and then it looks like this. So it's really exponential function if you really see. 1 divided by 1 plus e to the power minus z, where z is input data, and so this z is really this w transpose t, w transpose into x in this case. But it's really exponential function of some form. And so when I said this cell processes the input data, what I mean by that is this data is fed into this function really. Whatever the outcome that this function will give becomes the outcome of the cell, which is this probability number that is out of the gate. So do not worry at this point, because I know we really did not chalked out any example, or you did not have any chance to really do these things on your own. But just try to appreciate overall broader picture as to how this idea works. So what mathematically speaking, what is really happening is some data on the left hand side that represents the actual features of the problem combined with the weights, the corresponding weights, which represents the importance of those parameters in deciding this final outcome of the problem. So they are combined together in the form of this multiplication, and then they are fed into this non-linear function g, g of something, g of z in this case, um, which represents really some form of exponential function. And if you do that, then this function scales everything uh, up and really produces outcome that ranges from 0 and 1. That's what we wanted. We wanted some kind of probability, whether student will get admitted, or whether person will click on advertisement, or whether person will buy certain grocery item, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea really. Um so now the question is, how do you decide these weights, right? So you may not even know beforehand the importance of each feature uh, before doing this problem. So let's say I'm talking about exam scores, right? So this is exam 1, this is exam 2, this is some biased parameter of the problem. How do I know what are the weights, or what is the importance of exam 1 score versus exam 2 score versus importance of the bias parameter? And that's a very good question, because users may not know that. And if that is the case, then uh, what we really need to do is so-called training of the machine. The machine first needs to train, needs to get needs to be trained on some pre-existing data where answers are already available, like the graph before, where here we already had answers from the previous years. We already knew that when scores are like these, you either get non-admitted here or you get admitted here. So now can you back out those weights for exam 1 versus exam 2, and so on. And so that process is called as finding the weights, which is really the training of the neural network. uh, and so I will kind of explain it little bit on the next slide here. I believe I have it here exactly. So basically, as I said, we already know the answer of the already existing data. So we feed in some, so these features are fed into the nonlinear function here, g of z, which is g of w transpose x. And then we did not know these weights at the beginning. Now this is a good time to remind you of the Newton's method. And this is what I talked about. Understanding Newton's method really helps your uh, deep understanding of advanced machine learning algorithms, such as these, which I'm going to discuss here. So remember, in Newton's method, what we did not know the solution beforehand, so we guessed some solution, and then we ended up iterating that solution several times until we achieved convergence. And at some point we were so close to the solution that we declared, okay, we achieved convergence and we got the solution. So in the same spirit, what people do in this area of machine learning is these weight values, w0, w1, w3, these weight values uh, are guessed at the beginning, in the same spirit as Newton's method. Equation is of course slightly different, but ideas remains the same, and that's what I wanted to explain you guys here. So these weights are guessed at the beginning, so that you can combine input features with guessed weights, so that you can get some w transpose into x value to be fed into this nonlinear function. And if you do that, this model will predict something, right? Because you provided the model some input data, so it will provide some output prediction. Now this is where your fun part is. So this equation that is represented here, do not worry a lot about that, but what it does is it comes up with relationship between this capital Y, which is outcome from the model, and the small y, which is your actual answer. And so what it really tells you is it is just difference between how far your model prediction is from the actual reality, because you already have the history data. You already knew that okay, a student scored on this exam versus that exam, got admitted or not. So if model was good, this difference will be close to zero, but if it was wrong, then this difference will be huge. And then that's the reason this function is also called as cost function. And so the goal is to optimize this cost function. So if your model is able to optimize this cost function, then you can say that your model is accurate enough, and now it can predict some unseen data. So the training was done on seen data, which is your historical data, where you had already compiled answers. And so that's the reason you can predict the cost. So the cost really represents so it is a measure of how much of the prediction is from the reality. So in other words, you already knew whether students were admitted or not, and by using those guessed values of weights, if you do it this way, you will come up with some outcome which will be off from your reality. And so your goal is to optimize your cost, which is this parameter here, so that your outcome is close to the reality. So there is this direct analogy between this problem and Newton's method that we learned last week, where in Newton's method we optimized for f of x is equal to 0. So f of x was finite at the beginning, and then it continuously reduced iteration by iteration, and in finite iterations you ended up having x value such that f of x was 0. In this case, you are trying to optimize cost function j of w, and remember this w is these weights as I mentioned before. So j of w is really optimized, and in each iteration your goal is to really start out with some finite value of cost function j, which is a function of weights, and then find out weight values where this j is close to 0. So you can think of j as function f and w as x. So f of x equal to 0 in Newton's method problem is reduced to j of w equal to 0 in machine learning. So equations are slightly different, but idea is the same. And I know some of you are math majors, or some of you have extra interest in the topic of machine learning. So feel free to reach out to me if you guys are more interested on this, and I will give you a more detailed explanation on that. But I think this kind of explanation is good enough to establish direct relationship as to why we learned Newton's method, why it was important, other than the reasons we already know, which are solving for nonlinear equations and such. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover here. So one more time, we are trying to optimize this cost function j, and so once you are close to 0, that means now your model is able to predict an answer that is in line with already existing answer that you know from the previous graph. And what that also means is now you were able to find a good combination of these values for weights w0, wn and w3, where now you can use these values in this function and you can generate a good data. And that means this whole process is also called as training. So you completed the training on this model, and now this model is ready to be employed on more different variety of problems which are not seen by the model. And that's what typically done in machine learning community. So the first part of the problem is called as training of the model. So for that you need a lot of data, lot of already existing data having answers, and once you train those once you train your model with those data and establish the right combination of weight values, then your model is ready to fight the real world situations. and this aspect we will explore soon in the machine learning application that I'm going to talk about soon, and I will actually walk you through that example. So I know a lot of the stuff is here on the slide, but I hope I was able to convey the baseline idea, the reference idea. So just catch on to that. Uh, Machine learning in itself is a course, and it is definitely not possible for me, and not I am expecting that I will be covering all the details in just one lecture, and that's the reason I deliberately wanted to just cover a brief overview. So in future, if you encounter things like that, this will be useful. So let us proceed. And so if you do it this way, then so this is the actual program that I ran. If you guys are interested, I can talk about that program as well. But really what happened was I took the data from exam 1 and exam 2, which is this data really, fed it to the machine learning model, and I already know the answers, so I could train the model, optimize my cost, find out the exact combination of weight values that I was talking about, and then construct this boundary. So if I get the right combination of weight values, I can construct boundary like this. Now clearly this is not 100% accurate, but probably this is 90% accurate. Maybe these two guys, the way model is built, it shows that these are admitted, but these are definitely not admitted. And similarly here, and also some of the admitted people are shown as non-admitted here, but for most part the model is fine, and that's what usually people look for. So that's the idea. And now if you remove this data, and now if you throw some new data to this model, it already has a boundary, so it can tell based on what side of the this blue line the point falls. It can predict whether the guy is admitted or not. That's the simple part there. And now let's come back to the meat of this lecture, which is machine learning project of handwritten digit recognition. And so idea is we need to recognize numbers from 0 to 9. So there are, remember, 10 numbers. So 1 to 9, 9 numbers, and 0 is 10. So 0 to 9, we need to recognize 10 numbers. These are handwritten numbers. They look like this. And we already talked about this slide, I guess, at the beginning of the course, probably just before the spring break, when everything was good and you guys were excited to actually do this project. So while it is little bit unfortunate, it's not that bad, because I'm actually going to show you the code and how this idea works in real MATLAB setup, and some of the ideas that I talked about machine learning in this session itself. So I just wanted to make sure I rehash on some of the key points of this problem, and then I will launch MATLAB and actually walk you guys through the code itself. So what you see here is several images of handwritten digits, and this is just one visualization. There is a display function that I wrote in MATLAB, and it can display good nice images like these. But can we develop a model which can represent, let's say this is 9, this is 0, this is 1. So can it represent these numbers? Can it guess these numbers with high accuracy? That's the question we want to answer. So using neural network methodology, build a handwritten digit recognizer in MATLAB. So we will see that any random handwritten digit image will be provided as an input to the machine learning model, and model should be able to correctly identify the digit. So as you will see in the program, what I will do is I will first visualize this part where you get to see several handwritten digit images, and then we will randomly pick up one image, and then machine should be able to predict what that number is. That's the point. And then quantify things like accuracy. So model should be able to predict what is the accuracy on the whole data set. So what I'm actually going to do is, so disregard these parts because we do not have any team here, so there are no team members and such. So I did not really bother to take that down. Good thing is I myself am doing this project, so you don't even have to worry about this anymore. So this is just for informational purposes. So basically what I wanted to say was, so accuracy, right? So my plan is to actually provide several of such images to the machine. So remember, there is this training phase that is involved. So our model needs to be first trained to be able to come up with those weight values w0, w1, w3 and so on for this problem. Now I will talk about specifics of this problem because this problem is more complicated. So first we need to know what are the features of the problem that might constitute that x vector we saw on the previous slide, and then we will talk about what are the weights, and then the next obvious thing is come up with the training phase where we can finalize on weights. We will reduce the cost function, we will optimize the cost function and come up with right combination of weight. And for this problem I have 5000 images, so I will write this down here. uh, just a moment so I don't miss out on that. So that way you will be able to connect it much better. So 5000 images, 5000 images like these, so this represents one image. So 5000 of those handwritten images. So this matrix represents probably 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 and 10 here. So 10 into 10 probably 100 images, but in reality I have 5000 images. And then each image is 20 by 20 pixels, 20 by 20 pixels. So if you notice, this is grayscale image, meaning it is not color image, it is only grayscale. And those of you who have some background here, I will just represent what that pixel is. So for any image, you can represent really bad, so eraser tool will draw it somewhere here. Tool here. All right. So I'm trying to draw nice here. Do that. Good. Okay, not bad. And so let's say this image, this same image, I'm just zooming in here. It looks like this, right? And this is grayscale image. So I'm going to write this here. Grayscale, grayscale image. Grayscale image means it doesn't have colors. It only has shades of gray, ranging from white to black. And 20 by 20 pixel means there are 20 pixels on the x-axis and 20 pixels on the y-axis. So you can actually split this as a 2D matrix having 20 rows and 20 columns. Just imagine this way. And then each pixel means each of this matrix will have some value of grayscale ranging from 0 to 255. So depending on how close it is to black or white, this number will vary. So if it is in between, like some pixel from here, it will be some in between number. But if it is white, it will be probably higher value. If it is dark, it will be closer to this value, so on and so forth. That's the way images work. So for this problem, what are the features for us, right? So to be able to for us to be able to recognize what that digit is, what do we need to know? So we need to know each pixel, right? So that constitutes the features of the problem. So features of the problem are really the pixels itself. And how many of those are there? 20 into 20. So 20 into 20. So that really represents 400 features. There are 400 features in this problem. Rewrite that. I guess it did not get it right away. So 400. There we go. So 400 features. Now compare that to the problem, the Mickey Mouse problem that we just solved, where the goal was to find if students get admitted or not. So for that problem, there were only two features, exam 1 score and exam 2 score. So you only had x1 and x3 probably, and then x0 represents biased feature. Let's not worry about that at this point. So for every problem there is its own feature called as biased feature. So that makes it one more than current features. So similarly, this problem will have 400 of these features. Remember, 400 of these features just from the pixels, and then one biased feature. So 400 plus 1, I should actually write it here this way, 400 plus 1 plus 1. So that makes it 401 features. So 401 features of this problem, compare that to 2 and 1, 2 exams and 1 biased, which is 3 features of the student gets admitted or not problem. So this problem is definitely much complicated, and it requires more advanced and complicated neural network than the one that we just saw. And I just wanted to build this nice background and springboard, so that now would be a good time for me to actually get into MATLAB code and discuss from there. So my plan is really slightly rehash on this little bit in MATLAB. So I will show you the code, I will explain it little bit, and then I will execute it, and you will see for yourself how the code works. So I hope you were able to understand important aspects of machine learning application here. So and I hope this was the last slide. Let me confirm that. Yes. So that was the last slide. So let me open up my MATLAB window, and we will go from there. So I have logged into my Newparts account remotely using VMware connection. So those of you who do not know how to open up MATLAB so far, just refer to my email on the Blackboard, where I explained how to do this. It should be pretty straightforward and nice way to connect with MATLAB. So as promised, I will now walk you through the actual code of the project, and we will then rehash some of the concepts we just learned. So currently I am in this NN project folder, neural network underscore project I call it. So that's the folder. So my MATLAB instance is already in this folder, so I do not have to worry about it, and I can execute my project from here. All the important files are represented on the left hand side here. So I have several files. So .m files are really MATLAB code, and then you will see some .mat files as well. And this is really a good time actually for me to talk about these aspects as well. So but just to remember that. And then there is main function .asv. So this is really auto generated file, and so on. So what you have is really a main function here, and then other .m files are dedicated functions to do those tasks. So you already now know by now that what a function in MATLAB is. It's really a dedicated script that runs on its own, and one needs to call the function to be able to get executed. So that's the reason we have main function calling all these child functions, and it's really the driver of the program. So I have a main function opened up here. So what I plan to do is walk through this code line by line, and then execute it, and then we will see if it matches with our concept or not. So main function for machine learning. So if you use this percentage sign, it's really it means you're writing a comment. So it's a good practice to write several comments as a good developer. That sets you on a good path, good journey going forward. So initialization, so like always, we always do clear command, and it is for again clearing this workspace. So you already know this by now. We close everything that might be already opened from the um, pre-runs prior to executing this. All the windows will be closed, and then clear screen, so that is required. And then remember I talked about image, handwritten digit image of the size 20 into 20, so 20 pixels on x-axis, 20 pixels on y-axis, and so that constitutes 400 number of input features that I have to consider, I have to process before I make any decision on what that number is. And so that number is fed into this variable called input layer size. And so this input layer size is really, if I go back to my slides here, so this is your input layer size. So this represents a layer led to that. And then as I mentioned before, this is not a Mickey Mouse problem where we only have three features like in this example here, and then there is only output layer. So this is input layer, this is output layer. But the problem at hand is much complicated because we have multivariate features, 400 of those. And so for that problem, there is something called as hidden layer as well. So again, do not worry about this, just understand this as a concept, because we are not anyways learning this as a primary course materials. So what happens is, for bigger problems, when inputs layer is higher, we have to introduce one more hidden layer. The layer that resides between output and input is called as hidden. So one more layer here before you move into the output side of things. So for that, we have input layer, hidden layer, and then number of labels that represents number of outcomes of the problem. So in this case, again, I'm comparing this because this kind of relates, and that way you are able to appreciate the complexity of the problem at hand. In this case, the outcome was simply one probability, right? 0 to 1, whether student gets admitted or not, or whether person clicks or not, and so on. In this case, there are 10 possibilities because digit can be anything from 0 and 9. So that's why we have 10 possibilities. So we call it as number of labels 10. So from 1 to 10. So the way this program is developed is such that each label is mapped to its own digit. So 1 is mapped to outcome 1. That means if 1 is the label, that represents the digit is 1. If 2 is the label, then that represents digit is 2. This is true up till 9, if 9 represents digit is 9. But for 10, we really use 0. So in fact, the other way around, for 0 we use 10. So if it outcome is 10, it represents 0. And this is just to have one-to-one correspondence. That way programming becomes easier. Details like these are not that important, but those of you who want to actually code this can make a note of that. And then in here, at the very beginning, I have this statement, loading and visualizing data. So my plan is, as I mentioned here on the last slide, remember, I have 5,000 images of 20 by 20 pixels. So you can imagine it's a huge data set. So out of this 5,000 images, I want to randomly show 100 images in this format. So for that, I have this coding strategy here. So there is this display statement that pops up at the beginning, and then let's come back to this .mat format. MATLAB has this nice feature called as .mat file format, where you can preload your variables in matrix format. So .mat represents matrix. So input underscore data has two important metrics available in it. And if I use this load command, load that file name, which is this here, input data.mat. So in single quotes I write this file name, input data.mat. So if I use this load command, it loads the variables that are contained in the input data into the workspace. So I don't even have to come up with new variable names or anything like that. When I execute this line, whatever variables are there, they get popped up in my workspace as if I already have them, which is a great news. And so this input data.mat has two variables. One is matrix x and the other is column vector small y. And if I'm going back to this slide again, so this matrix x represents all the 5000 images with corresponding 20 by 20 pixels. So its size is 5000 rows and 400 columns, 400 representing each of these pixels. So 220 into 20 is 400. So 5000 into 400 represents a 2D matrix having rows 5000, columns 400. So that actually represents all of these pixels for each images. So each row represents one example. That's the idea. So I have 5000 of the rows. And then y is a column vector. So what that means is y is actual answer to the problem already known. Remember I talked about this. We should already have a data having answers. That way we can train the model and we can check the accuracy. So y has right answers already there, meaning if this is 7 at this spot, y will contain 7. So and so on. So y is really 5000 into 1 sized column vector, or maybe 1 into 5000 depending on its row vector or column vector. I believe it is column vector. Yeah, I guess it is represented here. X is 5000 into 400 sized matrix whose each row indicates one image, thus 500. In fact, it should be 5000 images. It's a typo. It should be 5000 images. So a lot of images, right? Lot of images. And then 5000 into 1 is a column vector y. So it's really a column vector, one column and 5000 rows, and each row representing outcome of that image. So if it is 7, it is 7. If it is 9, it is 9, and so on and so forth. The reason we have this y vector is because our model will predict something, right? So how would we know the prediction is good or bad? So we will always compare that to this y. That way it is easier for us to compare the outcome. And then these lines of code are really selecting randomly first 100 images. So those of you who are interested, I'm going a little bit deeper here. So rand perm stands for random permutations. It's a MATLAB function, and if you really see, size x comma 1 represents, it returns number of rows of this 2D matrix X, because 1 represents first dimension, and I already covered that earlier in this course. So if it is 1, it is rows. If it is 2, it is columns. So size x comma 1 will return number of rows of this matrix X, and it will feed into this random permutation function. And this random permutation function, what it does is it generates randomly the permutation from 1 to m, if it is m here. And I have opened up MATLAB MathWorks website here for better clarity. So if r is equal to rand perm 6, what it does is it generates random permutation between 1 and 6, having 6 outcomes. So it doesn't necessarily start with 1 and end with 6, but randomly it might start with anything, but wouldn't repeat that number then, and then cover all the entries randomly. The idea is really to generate some random series so we can display it, and that way each time when we execute this program, the display will be different. Otherwise it will be just same display. So that is done here, and then only 100 are selected of those random entries, because this will generate all the 5000 images. It will actually randomize all the 5000. So only first 100 are selected, and then this display data function, which is right here, will display those 100 in the form of a nice matrix looking picture that is shown here. So it's a good way of representation. Again, those of you who are more curious, I can go in little detail. Just let me know, meet me in the office hours, and I will discuss that little bit. I can even share my code with you if you guys are interested. So going further, so that's about display data. Then just to say something here, so that user is not sleeping, and because the program is bigger, and then loading neural network weights. So what I really don't want to do here is make this even more complicated. So the training phase I already omitted from this exercise, and I loaded pre-trained weights. So remember, we have 400, so I'm going back here again, 400 features plus one biased feature, so that makes it 401 features. For each of the feature there will be this weight w, and that will constitute this cost function. So in training phase we need to optimize this cost function, right, and come up with right combination of weights so that the answers are accurate. And so this is a training phase. It's a different concept in itself if I have to go into the details, but it works on the same principle as the Newton's method we just discussed. So the algorithm is also called as gradient descent algorithm. It's really a descent from the finite value, and it descends until convergence. That's why the name gradient descent. I'm not going to cover that here. And once you do that, it is little bit computationally expensive as well for the kind of features, for the number of features we are considering here. So for these purposes, I'm not really worrying about that. Rather, I have already trained it, and I have created this .mat file, separate .mat file, weights.mat, that has all the weights available here. And so theta 1 and theta 2 represents those w1 and w2 kind of weights. So that is just analogy. Do not worry about the sizes here, because we really did not get into the details, but it goes back to the layers, the number of layers, the units that are there in each layer, and so on. So what we said is, the kind of structure for this problem we chose is 400 in the input, 25 in the hidden, and 10 in the final. And so 400 plus 1 for biased, so that makes it 401. 25 plus 1, 1 as bias, so that makes it 26. And so depending on that size, these sizes are required for these weights. So just keep that in mind. And then it loads these parameters using this load command, similar to load command we used here, input data. Similar to that, we can also load weights. Those are already here in this file, and then they populate in the workspace. And then there is this predict solution function, which is also available here, that takes on these weights. So remember, these weights and x, so theta 1 and theta 2, you can think of them as combination of weights of layer 1 and layer 2 that I was discussing here. So in this case there was only one layer, so combining everything together, you can call it as theta 1, and then there is one more for theta 2. So just think of theta 1 and theta 2 as all the weights. All the weights together with these x features constitutes this data, which needs to be fed into this non-linear function, sigmoid function. So that's the job that is done in this predict solution function. So if I open up that, you will see it has this sigmoid function, and I can also open up my sigmoid function just to show you the equation again. So sigmoid is really 1 over 1 plus exponential minus z, and remember, this dot operator indicates it's a vector operation and not a scalar operation, because z can be anything. It can be scalar or it can be vector for that reason. So then that feeds up that, and then what it returns is interesting. So it returns this actual prediction. If you see, it returns this p variable, so it returns this prediction. So that is fed into the spread variable here, and then that's it for the whole set of 5000 examples. It can do that at once, because X is, remember, 2D matrix having 5000 rows and 400 columns representing all the 5000 images. So pred will predict those, and then we can actually calculate accuracy, right? So accuracy will be simply prediction matching with y. So remember, y is again coming from this input data.mat file, which has already answers in that column vector 5000 into 1 that we talked about. And so it only compares spread with y, multiplies it to 100 to give you percentage accuracy. That's it. And so this really constitutes coming up with the right accuracy and checking our model. So that's that. And then the final part is, again, just for fun, this rand perm function is again used over the number of examples, and then this for loop runs, and then it displays some randomly chosen image for the user, or in fact to the user, because user doesn't have to do anything here. And then again, this predict solution function is called, but now for only that image, not for the whole set. Remember, here we called it for the whole data set X. Now here it is only for that single image, and then it's gonna print what is the answer that it sees, and then it's gonna ask user if he wants to continue. So if he wants to continue, this for loop will go on repeating m number of times. Remember, m is 5000, so this is forever. If you hit continue, it's gonna go forever, or at least 5000 times. But if you hit quit, q for quit or exit, then it's gonna break out of this for loop and program will end. So that's the very interesting program. Gives you good mix of both machine learning and MATLAB general knowledge. So let me go ahead and run this, and then we will be able to appreciate it much better. I'm going to expand my command window so you can see the messages clearly on this screen, and then I hit this run button, and then it says, remember, loading and visualizing data, program paused, press enter to continue. This is just to do not I don't want to overwhelm the user, so each phase can be seen clearly. So see, these are randomly selected images in 100 first 100 images in this pattern, similar to here that I was showing. So each time you run this code, it's gonna be different because of that random permutation function we decided at the beginning. So it shows that. Now I'm going ahead and pressing continue, so enter for continue. Then it says loading several neural network parameters. It did that. It loaded all the x that x matrix. So you see here in this command window, in this workspace here, sorry, what I was saying before. So see, this x variable is already available in the workspace. We really did not define it anywhere. It was actually contained in that input data.mat, but x is now 5000 into 400. So 5000 rows and 400 columns representing all the 5000 images. So and then y is the outcome of each image. So prediction from the model is compared against y, and then we came up with this accuracy. So see, it is 97.52% accurate, which is really great. You remember this line here where we said comparing that prediction versus y and then multiplying it to 100 will give you accuracy. And for the next phase, now I'm going to hit continue, and it will randomly select any image, and then we will be able to see if model provides me right answer. Let me do that here. So it is displaying an image. Okay, let's see what that image is. So this is the image. So clearly this is handwritten 0. And remember, I talked about this before. 1 is mapped to 1, 2 is mapped to 2, 3 is mapped to 3, 9 is mapped to 9, but 0 is mapped to 10 for convenience in program. So when neural network says 0, it is really digit 0. So what that tells me is neural network was accurately able to predict this. So let me go ahead and actually show you a couple of more images just to get confidence in the model. So I'm hitting continue again and then displaying one more image now, and this time it is 8, handwritten 8, and neural network prediction is also 8. So great to know that. One more time, displaying image. So the image is 2 and neural network prediction is also 2. One more time, image is 6. Let's check that. So image is 6, almost 6, and prediction is also 6. Last, so image is 5 and then it is able to predict 5. Sometimes it might fail when 5 and 6 are close or stuff like that, and that's the reason the accuracy is not exactly 100%, but it is 97.52, which is close enough. But there is still close to 2.5% error content in the model. So sometimes it will fail, and you do it long enough time, you will notice that. So with that said, I guess you got a pretty good idea as to how machine learning models work. What do you mean by neural network and stuff like that? Let me go back to the slides here. And you're able to appreciate the whole machine learning idea. If you have any questions, or if you are curious on doing some interesting things with machine learning in MATLAB, let me know. I'm always glad to help. For this semester, for this course at least, I do not anticipate you will be doing any project because of the obvious reasons. But yet, I did not want you guys to miss out on this interesting, fascinating stuff. It's a very good skill to add on your resume, and your resume looks much better. You can do other important things as well. So just let me know if you guys are more interested. I hope you got most out of this video. Next week, I anticipate it will be the last lecture, and I will be covering some of the rehash of important MATLAB related things that we did, probably from the standpoint of graphics. So that might include showing two-dimensional data, showing complicated looking three-dimensional data or 3D surfaces, interesting commands to do that kind of stuff. Then there are some untouched aspects of the MATLAB that we couldn't do. I will try to cover those. That might include, let's say, reading some data from external files. However, in this project itself, we already saw we were able to read that .mat file, so it was one of the ways to do that. The other can be, you can have a text file and you can also read it, but I will probably show you next time. So it will be kind of a light session, not too much information like last couple of weeks, including this week. So that way I did not want to go too much crazy in the current times. And then that sets up a good stage. We end on good note there, and then beginning May we will have final exam. So if you have any doubt, any concerns, just reach out to me, and I hope we will be able to resolve that. So with that said, good luck to rest of the week, as well as rest of the semester. Hope you are staying safe and staying healthy. So see you next time. Bye.